"Excuse me, ma'am. Do you speak English?" The hostess tilted her head, her manicured fingers tightening around the iPad reservation screen. She repeated slower, this time louder too, as if volume could cross a barrier no voice ever could. "Ma'am, your name." Eleanor Voss blinked her silver hair, gently swept back eyes, calm but distant. She didn't flinch at the raised tone. Instead, she opened her worn leather clutch and held up a card, crisp and elegant, with her name in raised silver font. Beneath it, in block letters, "I am deaf. Please be patient. I read lips and use sign language." The hostess sighed. "Oh, okay, hold on." She turned to the maitre d', whispering behind her hand. "We've got another one. Table 4 isn't cleared yet?" The maitre d' frowned, glanced at Eleanor with veiled discomfort, and made a small shooing gesture. "Have her wait near the fountain. We'll figure something out." Eleanor didn't catch the words, but she saw the gesture, the dismissive eyes, the stiff, polite smile. She stood silently near the marble fountain in the entryway of Verite Manhattan's crown jewel of fine dining. Couples passed by in glittering gowns and pressed tuxedos, some casting curious glances. One man muttered under his breath, "Why would someone like her even eat here?" Eleanor Voss straightened her coat. She had been stared at for 62 years. It no longer hurt, but it never stopped stinging. From across the dining floor, Liam Walker, mop in hand, was wiping a corner where a waiter had just shattered a wine glass. His posture was calm, methodical, quiet, as if moving to music only he could hear. He caught sight of Eleanor standing alone, clutching her card like a passport to a world that refused her entry. Without a word, he set the mop aside. "Hello," Liam signed gently as he approached, fingers moving with a practiced grace. His face carried no pity, only presence. "Would you like a table by the window?" Eleanor blinked. Her fingers trembled slightly. Then, with a breath that seemed to lift years off her shoulders, she smiled the first genuine smile since she'd stepped inside. "Yes," she signed back, "with light, if possible." Liam nodded, and without waiting for permission, walked past the maitre d' and pulled out a chair at the best seat in the house, table 9, nestled near a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering city skyline. The maitre d' rushed over. "Sir, you can't just—" "She's with me," Liam said calmly, locking eyes for just a beat. "This table is open, isn't it?" "Yes, but then let her sit." The maitre d' hesitated and said nothing more. Liam turned back to Eleanor and signed, "I'll bring a menu." No rush. She gave him a look that was more than gratitude. It was recognition. 10 minutes later, the front doors slid open again. Alexandra Voss strode in with the purposeful grace of someone used to having the world make way. Midnight blue silk gown. Heels that didn't echo, they commanded. Her dark hair was swept into a loose chignon, revealing sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes. Her assistant tried to keep up juggling a tablet and 2 phones. "Reservation for Voss Alexandra," said. The hostess straightened at the name. "Yes, Ms. Voss, your party is already here." Alexandra arched a brow. "Excuse me," the hostess motioned toward the dining floor. "Your mother arrived early. She's seated by the window." Alexandra frowned and followed the hostess's pointed hand. She saw them before she registered what she was seeing. Her mother, usually stiff, usually guarded, was laughing. Not the polite social chuckle, but the kind of laugh that made her eyes crinkle and her shoulders relax. And across from her, not a waiter, not a manager, a janitor. He was kneeling beside the table, holding up a laminated menu and signing. His movements were fluid, warm. Eleanor responded with her own fingers, and for a moment it looked like a conversation in poetry. Alexandra stopped walking. Her throat tightened. She didn't remember the last time her mother looked that alive. "Would you like to sit, Miss Voss?" the hostess whispered. Alexandra's voice dropped lower. "Who is he?" "Oh, that's just Liam. He's one of the janitors. He doesn't usually, well, he's quiet." Alexandra said nothing. She stepped forward slowly, heels silent on the polished marble. Liam noticed her first. He stood professional but unshaken and gave a polite nod. "Ms. Voss," he said simply. No apology, no embarrassment. Eleanor beamed and signed, "He saved me from the fountain." Alexandra glanced between the two. "You sign," a little Liam replied. "Enough to make someone feel welcome." A pause. Alexandra sat down, placing her clutch beside the plate. Her eyes never left him. "Thank you. For treating my mother like a guest." "She is a guest," he said. "She just wasn't being treated like one." Then he gave a small nod and turned to leave. Alexandra watched him walk toward the staff hallway, disappearing through a door marked "Employees Only." She looked at her mother, who was still smiling, still radiant. She had built empires, bought out competitors, negotiated billion-dollar deals with men twice her age. But right now, Alexandra Voss felt small, because it wasn't her status, her money, or her legacy that brought her mother joy tonight. It was a janitor, with hands that spoke louder than most people ever dared. As the sommelier approached, Alexandra reached for her phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She wasn't sure why she wanted to take a picture. Maybe to remember this. Maybe to remind herself that this moment had changed something. But her hand trembled. She turned off the screen. It had been 15 minutes, but Alexandra Voss hadn't read a single word on the menu. Her eyes kept drifting past the crystal glasses, past the flickering votive candle, and back to the hallway door marked "Employees Only," where the janitor had disappeared, where the quiet man with kind hands and no name had walked away as though what he'd done wasn't extraordinary. Across from her, Eleanor was content. She gently tapped her water glass, her fingers tracing small shapes in the condensation, smiling to herself like a woman who had just returned from a place no one else could reach. And maybe she had. Alexandra leaned forward slightly and signed, "Who was he?" Eleanor smiled even wider. Her fingers replied with grace, "Someone who didn't need to speak to understand." After the first course arrived and the candle burned lower, Alexandra excused herself. Not because she needed the restroom, not because she was done eating, but because something in her chest wouldn't let her stay seated. She moved with practiced poise through the dining room, her steps measured and effortless until she reached the front reception and nodded toward the maitre d'. "Excuse me," she said, lowering her voice. "The man who helped my mother earlier, the janitor. What's his name?" The maitre d' blinked, surprised. "I believe it's Liam. Liam Walker. He works nights, keeps mostly to himself. Why do you ask? I'd like to thank him." A pause. "I can have someone call him up if you wish." No, Alexandra said. "I'll go." Down a long, dim hallway behind the kitchen, the hum of walk-in freezers and the hiss of dishwashers filled the air like white noise. A sign above a door read "Maintenance." She hesitated, then knocked. No answer. She pushed gently. The door creaked open, revealing a small, immaculately kept room, a supply closet, yes, but more than that. Rows of neatly labeled cleaning bottles lined metal shelves. Mops were hung with care. A child's crayon drawing was pinned to the side of a cabinet, slightly crooked but proud. A golden sun shone above 3 stick figures. Beneath it, in block letters, "Even broken things can shine again." Alexandra stared. Behind her, a quiet voice said, "She drew that after her mom's funeral." She turned. Liam was standing near the doorframe holding a small tray with rolled napkins and a bottle of disinfectant. He didn't look surprised to see her, just aware. "She said I was sad all the time," he continued. "So she made a picture of what she thought my heart looked like. Said it needed light." Alexandra's voice softened. "Your daughter?" He nodded. "Sophie. She's 8, and far wiser than I'll ever be." Alexandra stepped aside slightly, giving him room to enter the closet. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for what you did tonight, for my mother." "I didn't do anything special," Liam replied, setting down the tray. "I just paid attention. No one else did." "That's not unusual," he said with a faint smile. People only notice the quiet when it becomes inconvenient. She looked at him. Really looked. The uniform may have said janitor, but his posture, the calm intelligence in his eyes, the softness with which he'd spoken to Eleanor, none of it aligned with the assumptions people made in expensive rooms. Alexandra gestured toward the drawing. Your daughter's right. That sun shines pretty bright. Liam chuckled. She's also the reason I know how to fix a leaky sink braid hair and explain third-grade math without losing my mind. She smiled, and for a moment the tension that had lived in her shoulders for years lifted slightly. Then she reached into her clutch and pulled out a card. I'm hosting a philanthropic gala next Thursday, she said. It's in honor of accessible design for disabled communities. We're featuring voices from all over the country, but none as close to home as my mother's. Liam looked at the card but didn't take it. I'd like to hire you, Alexandra said. Not as a janitor, as a guest liaison, to help translate. She trusts you. There was a long pause. I'm flattered, Liam said at last, but I'm not looking for another job. It pays well. That's not why I said no. She tilted her head. Then why? He took a breath as if measuring how much of himself to reveal. Because when you step out of the shadows, you don't just get seen. You get judged. And I've got a little girl who thinks her dad's a hero for being quiet in a loud world. I'd like to keep it that way. Alexandra blinked not at the words, but at how deeply they landed. You know, she said slowly, I've met CEOs who can't give a better reason for anything they do. A half smile from Liam. We all have our truths. Mine just sweeps floors. He moved past her, gently headed back toward the hallway. But before he could disappear, Alexandra called out, Thank you again, Liam. He paused, and without turning around, he signed back over his shoulder. She heard me. That was enough. Back at the table, Eleanor was sipping her tea. She looked up as Alexandra returned and gave her daughter a knowing glance. Alexandra sat down, but her mind wasn't on dessert. What did he say to you? She asked. Eleanor signed slowly. He said, I mattered. Alexandra looked away, eyes glistening under the low light. She remembered being 10, trying to sign, I love you to her mother, and failing her fingers, fumbling her words, always getting lost in translation. She'd grown up building towers out of steel and glass chasing power and progress, but tonight it had taken a man with a mop and gentle hands to teach her what connection really looked like. The check came folded in a leather booklet with a delicate gold trim. As Alexandra signed it, she added a note beneath her signature, Thank you for hearing her. A.V. She folded the receipt back in and left the card on the table. That night she couldn't sleep, and for the first time in years, she didn't mind. The next afternoon, Alexandra Voss stood outside Verité pretending to be on a phone call she wasn't actually making. She wore flats instead of heels, unusual for her, and sunglasses too large for the overcast day. A security detail waited discreetly across the street, but she'd insisted on coming alone. She wasn't sure what she expected. Closure. A proper thank you. Maybe just a glimpse of that quiet janitor who had spoken more in gestures than most men managed with speeches. She had told herself it was curiosity, professional gratitude, nothing more. But deep down she knew the truth. Something about him stayed. The way he moved with intention but without ego. The way her mother smiled in his presence. The way he'd signed, she heard me. That was enough. Like it was a complete philosophy. Alexandra inhaled slowly, then stepped through the revolving door. Inside, the restaurant buzzed with pre-dinner prep. Staff arranged wine glasses. The barback polished stemware. The maitre d' spotted her immediately. Miss Voss. Twice in 2 nights, she offered a tight smile. I left something. A clutch. May I check your lost and found? Of course. While he walked off, Alexandra glanced around, searching for a mop, a cart, a man in gray and navy uniform. But there was no sign of Liam. A busboy passed carrying a stack of menus. She took a breath. "Excuse me, do you know where the janitor Liam is working today?" The boy blinked. He's in the back, ma'am. I think he's mopping the south hallway, or maybe restocking the closet." Alexandra's lips curled slightly. The closet. She found it, just like the night before, tucked past the freezer room behind a gray metal door with a sign half hanging off its hinge maintenance. She knocked softly. No answer. She knocked again. "It's Alexandra Voss. I'm not here for anything official. I just wanted to say something." Still no answer. She hesitated, then pushed the door open. Inside, it was exactly as she remembered the hum of a mini fan, the faint scent of lemon cleaner shelves so orderly it could have been a showroom. And there it was again, pinned to the cabinet with a magnet shaped like a smiling whale. The drawing. A crayon sun above 3 figures. One tall one, smaller one with a crooked ponytail. The words beneath glowed like gold. Even broken things can shine again. Alexandra stepped closer. The figure labeled Daddy had a tiny blue badge on his shirt, and he was holding the hand of the smallest one. Suddenly, the room didn't feel like a supply closet. It felt like a chapel. "That's where I do my best thinking," a voice said behind her. She turned. Liam stood in the doorway holding a bucket and mop. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his eyes calm as always. Alexandra straightened. "I didn't mean to intrude. I just couldn't stop thinking about what you said last night." "I say very little," he replied, placing the bucket down. "Exactly," she murmured. "And yet I remember every word." He didn't smile, but there was a softness in his eyes. She gestured to the drawing. "Your daughter." "Sophie." He nodded. "She's the artist of the house, always sketching something. Sometimes I think she sees the world more clearly than I do. Does she know sign language too?" "She does. Her mother was deaf." Alexandra blinked. "I didn't realize. It's not written anywhere," Liam said, "and I don't share it unless someone listens long enough to deserve it." That landed like a stone dropped in a still pond. "I'd like to," Alexandra said quietly. "Listen, I mean, not just as a daughter or a CEO, as a person who forgot how." Liam leaned against the doorframe. "My wife Jenna, she used to say, 'The world isn't loud because of noise. It's loud because everyone's shouting and no one's hearing.'" He looked at the drawing again. "After we lost her, Sophie stopped talking for nearly 5 months. She'd sign sometimes, but mostly she drew. That one he nodded toward the sun was the first thing she handed me when I came home from a night shift. Didn't say a word, just gave it to me." Alexandra stared at the crayon strokes. "That's profound." "It was healing," he replied. "For both of us." There was a beat of silence before Alexandra pulled something from her coat pocket, a sealed envelope. "I didn't just come to say thank you." Liam eyed the envelope but didn't reach for it. "I'm hosting a private event," she explained. "It's a gala, but not the flashy kind. This one's for people who don't usually get a microphone. People like my mother, people like Jenna." She swallowed. "I want you and your daughter to come." Liam looked at her not with suspicion but caution born from too many half-hearted invitations. "Why us? Because you reminded me last night that kindness doesn't ask for permission," she said. "And because my mother hasn't smiled like that in years. You gave her a seat at the table. Now I'd like to give you one." He finally took the envelope and turned it over in his hands. "It's just dinner," Alexandra added. "No speeches, no cameras. But I would be honored if you were there." Liam nodded once. "Let me check with Sophie. If she wants to go, we'll be there." Her smile bloomed before she could stop it. "Thank you." As she turned to leave, he called out, "Wait." She glanced back. Liam pulled a small magnet off the shelf and handed it to her. It was shaped like a rabbit wearing glasses. "Sophie collects these. She says every time someone takes one, it makes room for a new story." Alexandra looked down at the magnet, then back at him. "And what story would this one be?" Liam's reply was simple. The one where the CEO visited the janitor's closet, and left with something money couldn't buy. That night, Alexandra placed the rabbit magnet on her fridge next to a calendar full of meetings and reminders. It didn't match anything, but it felt like it belonged, just like the man who'd given it to her. The rain came to Manhattan like an afterthought, sudden, uninvited, but strangely cleansing. Alexandra sat in the back of her car watching droplets race each other down the tinted window. Outside, the city blurred into streaks of silver and amber. Her assistant scrolled through messages beside her, oblivious to the silence that had settled between them. Finally, Alexandra spoke. "Pull up the employee records for Verité." Her assistant looked up startled. "The restaurant." "Yes," she said evenly. "I want everything on a man named Liam Walker." The assistant hesitated. May I ask why Alexandra didn't answer immediately? Her gaze stayed on the rain. "Because he reminds me of someone I should have met a long time ago." It didn't take long. Within an hour, she had what she needed: employment history, emergency contact references. But there was one entry that caught her eye. Brooklyn Public School District, 2011-2018 Special Education Instructor, American Sign Language Department. Alexandra frowned. He was a teacher. The assistant nodded. According to this, he resigned 7 years ago. No stated reason. She read the next line aloud: recipient of the New York State Award for Community Advocacy for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Resigned after an award, Alexandra murmured. That doesn't add up. That night, curiosity became restlessness, and restlessness became movement. She drove herself, something she hadn't done in years, to Brooklyn, to a building that looked like every underfunded school in America. The paint peeled at the edges. The flag out front was faded, but the brass plaque beside the door still gleamed faintly in the streetlight, in memory of Jenna Walker, where hands learned to speak. Alexandra stood in the drizzle reading the inscription over and over until the words sank in, like truth revealed too late. Inside, an elderly janitor was locking up for the night. When she introduced herself, he chuckled softly. "Ah, Liam Walker, best man we ever had. Taught here for years. Kids adored him. You, one of his old students." "Not exactly," she said. "I met him recently." "Well, then you met a rare one." The man leaned on his mop eyes, distant with memory. He and his wife, Jenna, they started the ASL outreach here. She was born deaf, you know. Sweetest heart. They built this whole program together. He paused, then sighed. Until the accident. Alexandra's voice softened. "What happened?" The old man shook his head. Car hit black ice off the Williamsburg Bridge. He survived. She didn't. A beat passed heavy and human. After that, the man said he left teaching. Said the silence got too loud. Later that evening, Alexandra sat in her car outside her penthouse. The city's lights glittered below, indifferent and eternal. She whispered into the quiet. The silence got too loud. Her mind wandered back to the restaurant, to how Liam had looked at her mother, at the way his hands moved with reverence, not pity. He hadn't been just helping a deaf woman. He had been seeing his wife again in every gesture, every fragile smile. And Alexandra felt something she hadn't in a long time. A pang of empathy that wasn't born of guilt but understanding. The next morning, Eleanor noticed it immediately, the change in her daughter's expression. They sat together in the sunroom where the city skyline stretched like a painting beyond the glass. Eleanor poured tea, carefully, her hands steady despite age. Alexandra signed awkwardly but sincerely. "You look happy today." Eleanor smiled faintly, then signed back, "Because you're trying again." Alexandra chuckled. Trying what to listen, her mother signed. Not with ears, with heart. That single motion, heart, struck Alexandra deeply. She hesitated before saying aloud, "Do you remember the janitor from the restaurant?" Eleanor's smile brightened immediately. "Liam." "Yes. Him. Would you—" She hesitated. "Would you want him to visit again?" Eleanor's hands moved slowly, gracefully. "I would, but only if he comes for you, not for me." Alexandra frowned. "What do you mean? He already healed me." Eleanor signed, her expression serene. "Now, it's your turn." 2 days later, Alexandra stopped by Verite again. She wasn't dressed like a billionaire this time. Jeans, a soft sweater, no entourage. She waited near the back exit where Liam often clocked out. The staff gave her curious glances, but no one dared approach. When he finally appeared carrying his cleaning kit and that same worn lunchbox, she stepped forward. "Mr. Walker," she said, "do you have a minute?" He blinked in surprise, but nodded. "Sure. I found out you used to teach. You and your wife, Jenna. You built something meaningful." His eyes flickered with a quiet ache, but he said nothing. "I saw the plaque," Alexandra continued. "At the school. It's beautiful." He nodded again, his voice low. She was the kind of person who made silence feel like music. That line lingered in the air between them, weightless but unforgettable. After a moment, Alexandra said softly, "My mother asked me to invite you to teach her again. Not in a class, just dinner. Conversation." Liam looked away, conflicted. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Why not?" He hesitated. "Because people like me don't usually get invited twice by people like you." Alexandra held his gaze. Maybe it's time that changed. That evening, as she returned to her car, she noticed her reflection in the window. For the first time, she didn't see the sharp lines of a CEO who always won. She saw a woman trying to understand the language of humility and failing beautifully. At the end of the week, Eleanor sent a message through the housekeeper. A simple card with a handwritten note in neat cursive. "The man who listens without words deserves a place at our table. Bring him or don't come at all." Alexandra smiled. Her mother had always known how to draw lines in silence. Back at the restaurant that night, Liam stood outside the janitor's closet staring at the crayon drawing again. His daughter Sophie had added something new, a little stick figure with long hair beside the others. Underneath, in wobbly letters, she'd written, "The nice lady who made Daddy smile." Liam closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. Maybe, just maybe. Some stories were meant to be rewritten. The knock at the door came just as Liam was finishing the dishes. It was a Saturday. Rain tapped lightly on the windows. Sophie sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by markers and watercolor paper, her tongue poking out slightly as she concentrated on drawing a fox with glasses. Liam wiped his hands on a towel, glanced through the peephole, and blinked. Standing outside, slightly damp from the drizzle, wearing a navy trench coat and no makeup, was Alexandra Voss. He opened the door slowly. "You found my apartment. I asked the school for your address," she said. "Technically, it's public record." He raised a brow. "You know, most people text first. I didn't think you'd answer." He considered that. "Fair enough." There was a long pause. "I brought something," Alexandra added, reaching into her coat pocket and pulling out a small envelope. An invitation. This time, not to a gala. He opened it. Inside was a hand-drawn card on textured paper. A golden sun. 3 stick figures, and in careful, messy handwriting, "Dear Mr. Liam, thank you for being kind to my grandma. Please come to dinner with us. My mom said it's okay. Love, Sophie." He stared at it, then looked back at her. "You drew this," Alexandra gave a tiny smirk. "Not my style." Just then, Sophie's voice piped up from the living room. "Dad, who's at the door?" Alexandra smiled. "Is that her?" "She's painting a forest of dancing raccoons," Liam said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Then, stepping back slightly, he asked gently, "Would you like to meet her?" Sophie appeared moments later, holding her newest masterpiece like it was a national treasure. Her long brown hair was braided to one side, her cheeks still flushed with artistic excitement. When she saw Alexandra, she froze, then whispered, "You're the lady from the fancy restaurant." Alexandra crouched to Sophie's level and said, "And you must be the girl who drew the sun." Sophie grinned. "It was a gift for my dad. But now I draw for lots of people." "May I see your art?" Sophie led her proudly to the living room wall, where dozens of paintings were taped up a whale in space, a violin made of clouds, and in the center a janitor in uniform holding hands with a little girl standing under a glowing sky. Beneath it, in block letters, "My daddy makes the world quiet." Alexandra stared at it, her throat tightening. "Do you know what that means?" she asked softly. Sophie nodded. "It means he listens, even when people don't talk." A few minutes later, Liam poured tea in mismatched mugs, and the three of them sat at the kitchen table. The walls were lined with open bookshelves, half filled with children's novels, the other half with parenting guides, old poetry, and ASL manuals. "You've built a beautiful world here," Alexandra said quietly. Liam smiled at Sophie, who was now nibbling on a cookie and humming to herself. "She's the architect. I just pay rent." Alexandra turned to Sophie. "Your drawing invited me to dinner. Is that still on the table?" Sophie nodded seriously. "Yes, but Daddy's not good at pasta." "I'm terrible," Liam admitted. "Then I'll bring dessert," Alexandra said. "Deal." Sophie extended her pinky. "Pinky promise." Alexandra locked hers in. "Deal." Later that evening, after Alexandra left with a sketch, Sophie insisted she keep Liam stood at the sink washing the same mug twice without realizing it. Sophie peeked into the kitchen. "Is she coming back?" Liam paused. "Do you want her to?" Sophie shrugged. "She made you smile with your eyes." He turned, drying his hands. "What do you mean?" "You always smile with your mouth," Sophie said. "But when she talked, your eyes did too. Like you remembered something good." Liam crouched in front of her, his hands resting gently on her small shoulders. "She reminds me of someone who made me brave," he said softly. "Mom." "No," he replied. "You already do that. But maybe she's someone who helps me want to try again." Sophie tilted her head. "Try what speaking," he said. "Not with hands, not with cleaning. Just letting someone in." Sophie considered this. "You should tell her." Liam smiled. "Maybe I will." She leaned in and whispered, "Tell her with ice cream." "No one can say no to that." He laughed, and this time it reached his eyes. The following night, Alexandra's penthouse looked nothing like the world Liam imagined she lived in. It wasn't cold or ostentatious. It was warm, quiet, full of books, plants, and photographs. And Eleanor, seated near the fireplace with a small blanket over her lap, lit up the moment Sophie walked in. The two began signing immediately, fingers dancing like old friends. "She's fast," Eleanor signed to Alexandra. "She watches Disney movies with the subtitles on," Liam replied. "She's memorized Frozen in 3 languages, 2 of them silent." Everyone laughed. Dinner was simple roasted vegetables, garlic bread, and a store-bought cheesecake that Sophie insisted on slicing herself. At the end of the meal, Alexandra raised a toast. "To the voices we hear not through sound, but through soul." They clinked glasses, and for a long moment no one needed to say a word. Later, as Liam stood on the balcony watching the city breathe beneath them, Alexandra joined him holding 2 mugs of tea. "You know," she said, "you're not what I expected." He looked at her. "And what did you expect a man who cleaned floors to survive? Not one who used to teach the deaf to feel seen." He sipped his tea. "Sometimes survival teaches you more than success ever could." She nodded slowly. "You've given my mother something I never could." Liam glanced toward the window where Eleanor and Sophie were laughing silently. "You gave her the one thing I couldn't afford," Alexandra added. "Time." He didn't respond right away. Then, gently, he said, "Sometimes what people need isn't more time. It's just to be remembered in it." She turned to face him, her voice softer now. "And what do you need, Liam?" He looked down at the city, then back at her. A reason to believe that healing isn't selfish. Alexandra reached out, brushing a raindrop off his coat sleeve that had been left from earlier. Then, maybe she whispered, "We both came here to heal." He didn't answer, but this time his eyes smiled first. The chandeliers sparkled like stars caught in mid-conversation. The ballroom at the Astoria Pavilion had been transformed into a world of gold and dusk blue. Velvet drapes hung from the high ceilings, soft instrumental music floated through the air, and hundreds of guests, dignitaries, innovators, philanthropists moved like polished pieces in an elegant dance. But none of them were the reason Alexandra Voss kept checking the entrance. It wasn't for donors, or investors, or even press. It was for the man who once stood silently in a janitor's closet and the little girl who taught him how to see sunlight again. "Are you nervous?" Eleanor signed with a twinkle in her eye. Alexandra smirked, sipping her sparkling water. "Not about the speech." Eleanor's fingers moved gently. "About who you're waiting for." Alexandra hesitated, then signed back slowly, "Yes." Her mother rested a hand over hers and signed something simple, something powerful. "Good. That means it matters." At precisely 7:14 p.m., the double doors opened. Liam Walker entered not in his uniform but in a dark suit that fit him like truth plain strong, quietly dignified. One hand held Sophie's, the other a folded paper program. Sophie wore a simple navy blue dress with tiny stars stitched into the hem. Her eyes lit up when she saw Eleanor and Alexandra. Exhaled. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No swelling music, no crowd parting, but something inside her softened at the sight of them, like the universe had remembered to breathe. The event began with speeches, polite applause, carefully crafted words about accessibility, innovation, community outreach, but it wasn't until Alexandra stepped onto the stage that the air truly shifted. She stood tall at the podium, eyes scanning the crowd, then landing gently on Liam, Sophie, and Eleanor in the front row. "I was supposed to give a speech tonight about progress," she began, "about policy, impact metrics, design thinking," a soft wave of chuckles, "but I'd rather tell you a story." Silence settled over the room. "A few weeks ago, my mother walked into a restaurant where no one knew how to speak to her. No one, except one man, a man with no name tag, no title, no microphone. Her voice steadied. He spoke in silence, with dignity, and with no agenda but kindness. Murmurs began in the back of the room. Some were confused, others leaned in. I watched as my mother, a woman who's navigated 60 years of being invisible in rooms like these, smiled in a way I hadn't seen since I was a child. She paused, then said carefully, "Tonight, I invite you to listen the way he did. Not with ears, not with answers, but with intention." And then she stepped back and raised her hand. The lights dimmed slightly. From stage left, Eleanor emerged accompanied by Liam, who walked beside her like a quiet anchor. She took center stage and signed. There was no voiceover, no interpreter, just hands. Wrinkled, elegant, powerful hands telling a story that many couldn't understand, but all could feel. She signed of growing up surrounded by noise but never being heard, of being treated as less than whole, of watching her daughter grow distant, not out of malice but out of language lost, of the loneliness that didn't come from silence, but from being uninvited to speak. And then she signed of one night, one moment, one man, who didn't try to fix her, who didn't look away, who simply listened. Her final motion was slow, deliberate, her right hand pressed to her chest, then opened outward toward Liam. The room was frozen, and then a tearful standing ovation, not because of volume, but because of resonance, because in that moment they weren't applauding what they heard, they were applauding what they finally understood. Backstage, as the noise faded, Alexandra found Liam standing alone near the service elevator. She approached quietly, holding 2 glasses of cider. "You did that," she said softly, handing him one. "She did that," he replied. Alexandra looked at him. "You brought her voice back." He shook his head. "Her voice was always there. I just made sure someone stopped talking long enough to hear it." They stood in comfortable silence. Then she asked, "Why did you come tonight?" Liam hesitated, then answered with something raw and unguarded. "Because my daughter drew a picture of a woman who made me smile. and when I looked at it I realized I hadn't smiled like that in years." Alexandra's eyes shimmered. "And because," he added, "you invited us to a room that people like me don't usually get invited into." She stepped closer. "Then stay," she whispered. "Don't leave the room." He met her gaze. "Are you asking me, as the CEO, or as the woman who smiled back?" A pause. Alexandra's reply was quiet but certain, as the woman who finally learned what silence can teach. Nearby, Sophie twirled beside Eleanor, who clapped along with her small spins, both laughing without a single sound, and yet creating the loudest joy in the room. That night, as the gala wound down and guests filed out, Alexandra stood by the grand exit, shaking hands, thanking donors. Liam and Sophie approached last. Sophie handed her a small envelope with a doodle of a moon and a broomstick. Inside a note, written in marker, "Dear Miss Alexandra. Thank you for giving my daddy a night where he didn't have to clean anything. Love, Sophie." Alexandra smiled through a lump in her throat. She knelt to Sophie's height and whispered, "He's cleaning something much bigger now." Sophie beamed. "The world." No, Alexandra said. "My heart." As they stepped into the night, Liam looked back once. Alexandra was still standing there holding the drawing against her chest like something sacred, and, for the first time in a very long time, he allowed himself to believe he hadn't just survived his story. He had started a new one. 3 days after the gala, the invitation still sat unopened on Liam's kitchen counter. It wasn't a printed one this time. It was handwritten in Alexandra's bold, looping script, sealed with a gold sticker embossed with the letter V. Liam had read it the moment he got home, of course, and reread it twice more since, but he hadn't answered, and he didn't know why. On Thursday afternoon, he picked up Sophie from school. Her backpack bounced against her back, and her ponytail swayed as she skipped to his side. Miss Grady said, "My sunflower dog painting is going in the hallway," she beamed. Liam smiled. "That's great, sweetheart. She also said I have good eyes for shadows." "What does that mean?" "It means you see the parts people forget to look at." Sophie considered that for a moment. "Like you." Liam raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "You see stuff no one else notices, like when the fridge makes that weird hissing noise or when Miss Alexandra gets quiet before she smiles." That stopped him mid-step. "Is that so?" "Yep," Sophie said. "You see the soft things." Liam exhaled a laugh through his nose. "Well, let's hope the world's ready for more soft things." That evening, just as Liam was folding Sophie's laundry, there was a knock at the door. He opened it to find Alexandra standing there with a box of cannoli and a nervous look that didn't match her usual CEO confidence. "I come bearing peace," she said, holding up the box. "And sugar. Both are welcome here," Liam replied, stepping aside. Sophie popped her head out from the hallway. Ms. Alexandra smiled. "Hey, Picasso." Sophie giggled, then whispered loudly to her dad, "I told you she'd come back." Liam gave her a mock glare. Traitor. Later, after dessert and laughter and Sophie's early bedtime, Liam and Alexandra sat on the small balcony, the city humming gently in the distance. "You didn't respond," she said after a while. "I know. I wasn't sure if you were thinking about it or politely ignoring it." Liam took a sip of his tea. "I wasn't ignoring. I was weighing what." He looked down at the mug in his hands. "You asked me to run a center, Alexandra. That's not a small ask. It's not a small center." He gave her a sideways glance. She continued, her voice softer now. "You've done more with your hands than most men do with 10 assistants. You taught. You built curriculum. You advocated. You sacrificed." "I quit," he said plainly. "No," she replied, "you paused. For Sophie, for grief. But what you gave up didn't disappear. It's still in you." Liam was quiet. Then she leaned in slightly. "Let me give it back to you." His voice was low. "It's not that simple." "Why not?" He met her eyes. "Because if I say yes, I don't know if I'm saying yes to the job or to you." The silence that followed was delicate but charged. Alexandra whispered, "What if I want you to say yes to both?" Liam looked at her for a long moment. "Then you should know something. Tell me." "I've built my whole life on keeping Sophie's world steady. I can't afford to gamble with her peace. I'm not asking you to." He shook his head. "You're not. But your world, it's not steady, Alexandra. It's fast and shiny and dangerous." Her reply was immediate. "Then slow it down with me." He blinked. She took a breath, choosing each word with care. "Every room I've ever walked into, I've had to fight to be seen, to be heard. But you saw my mother without trying. You saw me without asking. And I've never felt more like myself than when I'm talking to you." Liam swallowed hard. "I don't want a prince," she continued. "I want someone real, someone who listens, someone who knows how to stay." His next words were barely a whisper. "I've forgotten how." Her hand moved just slightly, a silent offer. Not a demand. "I'll remind you," she said. A few feet away inside the apartment, Sophie watched from the cracked balcony door, hugging her favorite pillow, the one shaped like a cloud. She smiled, then tiptoed back to her room. Later, Liam sat alone on the edge of his bed, the unopened envelope now resting in his lap. He traced the gold seal with his thumb, and finally broke it. Inside was a handwritten letter. No logo, no title, just words. "To the man who listens better than anyone I've ever met. I am opening something new. Not just a center, but a space where silence is sacred and voices don't have to be loud to be heard. I don't want to do it without you. Let me build this with you slowly, quietly, and with meaning. Sincerely, Alexandra." He folded the letter, then looked toward the small canvas tacked to his wall. Sophie's newest drawing. A little building with glass walls, people signing through the windows. And on the roof in bright orange crayon it read, "Hands of Hope." The next morning, Liam walked Sophie to school. She skipped beside him, hair bouncing, hand in his. "Hey, Dad," she said. "Yeah. If you say yes to Ms. Alexandra's job, does that mean we get to be around her more?" He raised a brow. "Would that be a good thing?" Sophie grinned. "She laughs with her eyes. And you do too now." Liam looked ahead, watching the city wake up around them. Then maybe he said softly, "It's time to stop pausing." That afternoon, Alexandra sat at her office desk, surrounded by folders, blueprints, and a team waiting for her decisions. Her phone buzzed. A message from Liam. "Tell me where to start, and where to stand beside you." She closed her eyes and smiled. The morning headlines hit harder than any storm. Billionaire CEO's latest PR stunt, hiring a janitor as center director, sparks backlash, Alexandra Voss. Blurs lines between business and charity, and maybe romance. Single, dad, janitor, real-life hero, or just convenient narrative. Liam didn't see the news first. His neighbor did. Mrs. Dugan, who always brought banana bread on weekends, stood at his door with a worried frown and her phone screen glowing. "Is this true?" she asked gently. Liam blinked at the headline, his chest tightening. Then the photo loaded a grainy zoom-in of him walking beside Alexandra after the gala, Sophie skipping between them. It looked like a scene from a movie, and they had turned it into mockery. Across the city, Alexandra's phone was already buzzing before she reached her office. Her assistant looked pale. "The board wants an emergency call. PR flagged the story an hour ago. It's gone viral." Alexandra nodded, jaw tight. "Schedule it. I'll handle it." Also, the assistant added, hesitating, "Your father's foundation just pulled their matching grant for the new center." Of course they did. Money always ran when perception got uncomfortable. Liam turned off the TV. Sophie sat on the couch quietly folding her paper cranes, something she did when she felt the air shift. "Daddy," she asked, "are you in trouble?" He knelt beside her. "No, sweetheart, not trouble, just misunderstanding." She tilted her head. "Did you do something wrong?" "No." "Did she?" Liam paused. No, but sometimes when people don't understand something beautiful, they try to break it. Sophie frowned. Can I fix it with a drawing? He smiled faintly. I wish you could. That afternoon he arrived at the Hands of Hope site, a newly renovated space not yet open with blueprints taped to the walls and paint buckets still in corners. He found Alexandra alone, pacing near the front window, arms folded, phone vibrating endlessly on a side table. She turned when he entered. I was going to call, she said. I figured, he replied. They stood there, tension thick, both waiting for the other to offer the first thread of truth. I didn't ask for this, she said. I didn't feed the story. I know, but I also didn't stop it fast enough. That silence between them, the one that once felt comforting now, felt like glass. You could have shut it down, he said. Told them the truth. Defended me. Us. Her voice dropped. And what would that have cost? He stared at her. What hasn't it already cost? She turned away, biting the inside of her cheek. You know what the board said today? They said the only thing more dangerous than being unpredictable is being sincere. Liam laid out a short laugh. So, I was a mistake. Her eyes snapped back to his. No, you were the most human thing I've done in 10 years. Then why didn't you fight for it? Alexandra's voice cracked slightly. Because I've spent my entire life building something I thought mattered, and in one morning they made you look like a prop, and you let them. The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Finally, Liam said quietly, I didn't come here to be a story. I came here because I thought we were building something honest. We were, she whispered. But the moment it got hard, he said, you disappeared behind headlines. She stepped closer. Liam, please. No, he said, backing away. This isn't about your board or my reputation. This is about something you taught me about listening. He looked at her eyes full of pain. You heard my story, Alexandra. But when it was your turn to speak, you went silent. She opened her mouth, then closed it. He gave a slow nod, turned, and walked toward the door. Then stopped. I won't let Sophie be turned into a punchline, he said without turning back. So I'm stepping away. From the center. From all of it. Liam, but the door had already clicked shut. That night, Eleanor refused to eat. She sat by the window in Alexandra's penthouse, tea-untouched gaze fixed on the city lights. Alexandra placed a blanket around her shoulders. Her mother signed slowly, deliberately. What did you do? Alexandra sighed. I tried to protect him. By leaving him alone, I was scared. Everything was unraveling. Eleanor's hands stilled. Her eyes were sharp, but not cruel. Do you remember when you were 13 and I missed your recital? Alexandra looked away. Of course I do. You didn't speak to me for 3 weeks. You told me you had a migraine. I lied, Eleanor signed. I was afraid to sit in a room where I couldn't understand what was being said. So I stayed home. I stayed safe. Alexandra blinked. I didn't know that, and it cost me your trust. Her mother leaned closer. Don't become me, Alexandra. Don't let fear sound like silence. Tears welled in Alexandra's eyes. Eleanor signed one last time. You found someone who listens. Don't teach him how to stop. Back in their small apartment, Sophie placed a drawing on Liam's pillow. It showed a man holding a broom and a woman holding a heart. Between them stood a little girl with her hands raised. Underneath it simply said, Please talk again. Liam sat on the edge of the bed, the paper trembling in his fingers. He didn't cry, but something inside him went still. The kind of stillness that comes right before a decision. The chair hadn't moved in 2 days. It sat by the window of Alexandra's penthouse facing east, bathed in the filtered light of early spring mornings. Eleanor Voss sat in it like a statue carved from quiet, still composed, unyielding. She hadn't touched her tea. Hadn't picked up her sketchbook, hadn't signed a word. Alexandra stood near the doorway, arms folded tightly against her chest, watching her mother drift further and further into a silence that felt different this time, heavier, lonelier. I can bring in Dr. Brenner, she said gently, or someone from the foundation. Just to check, Eleanor slowly turned her head, met her daughter's eyes, and signed one sentence. "No doctor can treat what cowardice causes." Alexandra froze. Eleanor turned back to the window, hands folded in her lap, and the room fell still again. Down in the office, Alexandra tried to work, but the words on her screen blurred. The numbers meant nothing. The glowing calendar, filled with rescheduled board meetings and branding calls, pulsed like a warning light. Her team walked on eggshells. Her phone buzzed with apologies. Articles were quietly retracted, new PR headlines drafted. The storm had moved on. But Liam hadn't come back, and Sophie's silence in the drawings Alexandra kept receiving by mail felt louder than any scandal ever had. That evening, she walked to the maintenance room at Verité. The door was locked. Dust had gathered on the doorknob. The whale magnet was gone. Inside, she imagined the neat rows of bottles, the little shelf where Sophie's drawings once lived, the feeling that this tiny space had once held more truth than most boardrooms ever had. She pressed her hand flat to the door. "I miss your silence," she whispered. It was the first thing that ever made sense. Back at home, Eleanor didn't look up when Alexandra returned. But as her daughter passed, she reached out and lightly caught her wrist. Alexandra stopped. Her mother signed slowly, deliberately. "You once asked me why I didn't teach you to sign." Alexandra nodded. "I remember." Eleanor signed. "Because I thought it would be easier for you to speak to the world than to speak to me." Alexandra's eyes welled. It wasn't. Eleanor gently touched her face. "Then stop running from the conversation that matters." That night, Alexandra couldn't sleep. The skyline blinked outside her window like a city caught between heartbeats. She got out of bed and wandered into the guest room where Sophie had stayed during that one magical week that now felt like a lifetime ago. The bed was still made. A small, cloud-shaped pillow rested on it. On the desk was a crumpled drawing forgotten in haste. She smoothed it open. It was a picture of Eleanor, and Liam, and herself, all three sitting at a dinner table, all three smiling, and in the center, written in block letters, the words, "Nobody was talking, but everybody understood." Alexandra sat on the edge of the bed and broke. The next morning, she walked through the park near their old school. Liam used to take Sophie there every Saturday, rain or shine. Alexandra remembered watching them from afar once before they knew each other, wondering how a man with so little could carry such peace. She now knew the answer. He didn't carry it, he chose it, every single day. She returned home just after 11 a.m. The tea tray was still on the windowsill, but Eleanor was gone. For a breathless moment, panic seized her chest. Then she heard faint rustling from the art room, the one her mother hadn't entered in months. She pushed the door open slowly. Eleanor sat at her easel. Her hands, shaky but steady, moved with purpose. The canvas was half finished. It showed a small janitor's closet bathed in warm amber light, bottles on neat shelves, a child's crayon drawing taped beside a folded note. The floor gleamed like a mirror, and in the center stood a man with no name tag, just a mop in one hand and a sunflower in the other. Alexandra stood in the doorway, breath caught in her throat. Eleanor turned, slightly met her eyes, and signed, "Go to him," or "This painting will never be finished." An hour later, Alexandra stood outside Liam's apartment. She didn't bring a driver, or security, or even a plan. Just the original drawing from Sophie now carefully tucked in a frame, and the courage to knock. But no one answered. She knocked again. Still nothing. She was about to leave when a voice called down from the balcony above. "Are you looking for my dad?" Alexandra looked up. Sophie stood at the railing holding a carton of sidewalk chalk. "He's not home," she said, "but I am." Alexandra smiled. "May I come up?" Sophie nodded. They sat together on the floor of the tiny balcony, chalk-stained and surrounded by suns and stars. Alexandra handed her the framed drawing. "I kept it," she said. "It reminded me what home looks like." Sophie studied her carefully. Did you come to say sorry?" "Yes," Alexandra whispered. "To your dad. And to you." Sophie nodded once. "I think he wanted you to. Where is he?" "He went to the community center," Sophie said. "He needed air. But he took the picture I drew of you." Alexandra blinked. "He kept it." Sophie smiled. It was the only one he didn't hang. He put it in his drawer. Alexandra laughed softly. "That sounds like him." Sophie looked down at the stars she'd drawn. "Do you love him?" she asked suddenly. Alexandra didn't hesitate. "Yes. I love the way he listens. I love the way he sees people. I love that he teaches you to be kind without saying a word." Sophie's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then tell him before it's quiet forever." Later that evening, Liam returned home to find chalk stars on his doorstep, and a note taped to his front door. In Alex's handwriting it said, "If you're willing to hear me, I'm finally ready to speak." It started as a simple power flicker, a hiccup in the grid, a blink of the lights in the freshly renovated Hands of Hope Center now just days away from opening. No one panicked. Not at first. In the main hall, volunteers were finishing banner placements. Technicians adjusted sound equipment. Eleanor had arrived early with her sketchpad and a thermos of herbal tea, sitting quietly in the sunroom, enjoying the view. Liam had stepped out for a quick errand. A shipment of tactile books had been delayed, and he insisted on picking them up himself. Alexandra was on a video call upstairs when her screen froze. Then all the lights went out. "Looks like the backup generator's kicking in," one tech muttered. Except it didn't. Instead, a sharp hum filled the air, followed by silence. And then the elevator stopped. The hum didn't return, and neither did the light. On the lower floor, Eleanor had been heading to the elevator, intending to meet Alexandra for lunch. Now she was trapped. The emergency system failed. The intercom didn't work, and she was alone in a metal box with only silence and a flickering red light to keep her company. But Eleanor Voss had lived her entire life inside moments like this. She didn't scream. She didn't panic. She started signing, not out of habit, but as a signal, a beacon, because someone somewhere might still be listening. Upstairs, Alexandra's phone lost signal. She stepped into the hallway and immediately sensed something was wrong. Too quiet. No staff, no buzz, no elevator hum. Then she saw one of the tech crew sprinting toward her. "Ms. Voss," he panted, "the power's gone. Generator failure. We've got someone stuck in the elevator. Who your mother?" The words hit like ice. Alexandra didn't think. She just moved. "Call 911, she shouted, running down the stairs 2 at a time. Her heels slammed the concrete. Her breath came in gasps. Her mind swirled. Not again. Not now. Not like this. Liam arrived just as the fire trucks did. He saw the flashing lights before he saw the chaos. Volunteers were huddled near the sidewalk. EMTs were pulling cables and flashlights. Then he saw Alexandra, white-knuckled, standing by the elevator control panel, yelling into her phone. "She's in there," she cried. "She's deaf, and she's in there. You need to get that door open." Liam dropped the box in his arms. "Eleanor," he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alexandra turned breathless. "She's stuck. No lights, no comms. She's signing something on the camera, but her voice cracked. No one understands." Liam was already moving. Down in the control room, a grainy feed from the elevator flickered. A woman's hands moved in short, urgent bursts, repeating a phrase again and again. One firefighter squinted at the screen. "She's waving, I think." "No," Liam said firmly. "She's signing." He stepped closer. His eyes scanned every motion, every tremble of her fingers. He leaned toward the camera and said, almost in disbelief, "Gas. She's signing gas leak." The room went still. "She can smell it," Liam added. "She's trying to warn us." The firefighter turned pale. "Holy, get everyone out," Liam snapped. "Now." Evacuation was swift. Staff flooded into the street. Gas sensors were deployed, and sure enough, a line had ruptured in a lower storage room. One spark could have turned the center into rubble. But thanks to Eleanor, and thanks to Liam, it didn't. Inside the elevator, she was still signing, still warning, still trying. Liam knelt by the elevator shaft, hands pressed to the metal. "I hear you," he whispered. "Hold on. I'm here." When the door finally groaned open, Eleanor blinked against the flashlight glare. Alexandra rushed forward but paused, because Liam was already there. He reached for Eleanor's hand and signed, steady and slow, "You saved them. You saved all of us." Eleanor smiled, tears in her eyes. Alexandra stepped forward, then dropped to her knees and threw her arms around her mother. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry for every time I didn't know how to listen." Eleanor touched her face and signed, "Now." "You do." Later, as the center stood empty under the soft fall of twilight, Liam and Alexandra sat on the front steps. Sirens had faded. The building was safe. No one was harmed. But something had shifted. "Do you remember what you told me the first night we met?" Alexandra asked. Liam nodded slowly. "I said if no one else would listen to your mother, I would." She looked at him, eyes full of unspoken things. "Well, now I need you to hear me." He turned toward her. "I was scared," she said. "When they came after you, I panicked. I told myself I was protecting what we built. But the truth is, I didn't protect you." She reached into her coat and pulled out something folded. A drawing. Sophie's drawing. The one he'd kept tucked away. "I found this in your desk," she whispered. "And I realized something. With that, she didn't draw us holding hands. She drew us standing side by side. She unfolded the picture between them. And maybe that's the point," she said. "You're not behind me, Liam. You're not under me. You're beside me. And that's where I want you to stay." He looked at the drawing, then at her. "You still want me?" he asked, voice quiet. "I never stopped," she answered. "And now I'm ready to stay. Not just for Sophie, or for my mother, but because I finally know how to listen to the part of myself that only gets louder when I'm near you." He reached out, took her hand, and this time neither of them let go. Inside the center, Eleanor walked slowly through the halls, fingers grazing the walls like a pianist remembering a song. She paused near the elevator, placed her palm flat against the door, and signed silently, "Thank you." Not to the building, but to the man who heard her when the world had no sound. 6 months later, the Hands of Hope Center stood tall not just as a community hub, but as a promise kept. The walls bore soft watercolor murals, now many painted by children who once whispered in fear, but now signed in confidence. Braille plaques were mounted beside every door. Sensors lit up walkways. And in the heart of the lobby, a bronze sculpture captured a hand mid-sign, 2 fingers to the chin palm forward. "Thank you." It was Eleanor's hand, sculpted from a real mold, and beneath it in etched letters read, "Because some voices are seen, not heard." On this particular afternoon, the air was thick with spring warmth. Gardenias bloomed outside, and children's laughter rang across the courtyard. Inside, Alexandra stood beside the reception desk adjusting the final ribbon for the annual family day. She was in jeans and flats, still elegant, still poised, but softened. There was less armor in her eyes now, less need to prove anything. Behind her, Liam walked in carrying a tray of lemonade and 2 sandwiches wrapped in paper towels. Sophie trailed beside him, her tiny hand curled around his pinky. "Lunch delivery," he said with a grin. Alexandra turned and smiled. "You brought it in a towel. Napkins ran out." He shrugged. "Janitor solutions." She laughed, resourceful as always. He handed her a sandwich. "You're running on fumes." "I'm running on hope," she corrected, unwrapping the bread. "And caffeine." Across the room, Eleanor sat near a window watching a little boy show his grandfather how to fingerspell his name. She didn't interrupt, just observed, her eyes warm. Then she turned to her own sketch pad and drew, 1 quiet line at a time. The event began just after noon. Families gathered, volunteers shared stories. A choir of children performed "You Are My Sunshine," using sign language, and halfway through the song, a dozen parents in the audience broke into tears. Liam was by the side stage watching with Sophie in his lap. She practiced that sign for happy, All week, he whispered, his voice catching as Sophie made the motion with both hands. Alexandra touched his knee gently. "She wanted you to see it," she murmured. "You taught her that words aren't the only way to be heard." Liam nodded, overcome. Then she added softly, "So did you. For all of us." Later that day, as guests trickled out and the sun began to slide lower in the sky, Liam walked alone toward the janitor's closet. It was the same one where everything had started, where he first fixed a squeaky wheel and where Sophie's crayon drawing had once hung. That drawing was now framed above the desk, protected behind glass. Even broken things can shine again. He stared at it for a long time, then sat on the small stool beside the mop bucket. Pulled out a piece of paper from his jacket, unfolded it. It was an offer letter. From a non-profit tech firm. Starting salary 3 times what he made now. Head of Accessibility Development. He stared at the signature line, then at Sophie's drawing, and, for the first time, he wasn't sure what to choose. The door creaked behind him. Alexandra stepped in holding a coffee. "You hiding in here?" Liam chuckled. "Old habits." She looked at the paper in his hands. "You finally opened it." "Yeah. You going to sign it?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he asked, "What if the thing I'm meant to build isn't a device or a salary or a title?" She tilted her head. "What if it's a life, a place? A little girl who thinks the sun can fit on paper. A woman whose eyes finally stopped looking past me." He looked up at her. What if this was the invention all along? Alexandra stepped forward, and then without a word she knelt in front of him, pulled a small velvet box from her pocket, opened it. Inside was not a ring, but a key. To the building. To this place, he asked, surprised. "No," she whispered. "To us." They stood under the stars that night. Sophie dozed in his arms, her head tucked under his chin. Eleanor leaned back on the bench, her sketchpad on her lap, drawing the night sky. Alexandra turned to Liam, quiet. "My father once told me that love isn't what you say in a ballroom or during some grand proposal. It's what you do at 6 a.m. when the floor needs mopping and the coffee's burnt." Liam smiled. "Wise man." She reached for his hand. "And I think the man who chooses to love quietly every day without applause is the man I want standing beside me when everything else fades." He looked down at Sophie, then at her, and finally said, "Then let's build a forever that doesn't need noise. Only presence." Eleanor finished her sketch and turned it toward them. It showed 2 figures standing beneath stars, one holding a mop, one in a dress, both with hands mid-sign mirroring the same motion. Forever. And in the corner the words scrawled in delicate, imperfect cursive. Some voices echo louder in silence than any words ever could, and sometimes the most beautiful conversations are the ones spoken without a single word, because kindness doesn't always need a sound, it just needs to be seen. If you've ever witnessed a moment like this, or if you have a story about compassion healing or quiet love that changed someone's life, share it with us in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story. Where are you watching from tonight? Let us know your city or country. In the comments, it always warms our hearts to see how far these stories travel. If this story touched you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Every story here is a little piece of hope, and hope grows stronger when it's shared. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Until next time, keep listening with your heart.